Well, President Biden will deliver remarks later this morning at South Carolina State University's fall commencement. The visit comes at a fraught time for the president's legislative agenda. It no longer looks like his Build Back Better package will pass by the self-imposed Christmas deadline. President Biden and Democratic holdout Senator Joe Manchin have been locked in disagreement for weeks over the planned spending. Weijia Jiang joins us now from the White House to find out what is going on. So what do we know about negotiations other than at least they're ongoing? It's better than they're stalled. But it appears as if, Joe Manchin will not be satisfied, at least not by the end of the year.
Well, Anne-Marie, this week we learned that those negotiations between the president and Manchin were not going well. They had been speaking frequently, but our Hill team discovered that in those meetings they weren't really making much progress at all. And so amid those reports, the president issued a paper statement last night to say essentially everything's fine. He did have to acknowledge that they weren't going to be able to pass this by Christmas as they had hoped, but he said that in recent weeks, Manchin reiterated his support for the Build Back Better plan as it stands now, which is important, the current framework. And he says that he will continue to talk to Manchin. But, we don't know what that really means, Anne-Marie, because what's still unclear is exactly what Manchin is asking for in these negotiations. And so even though the president is trying to signal optimism here, I think that it's really a big question mark as to when this thing will ever get passed, if it will ever get passed in its current state.
So I know you said it's sort of unclear as to what Manchin is asking for, but I'm going to ask you for some clarity. Is his concern, the long-term debt implications? Is his concern the current inflation worries? Is he specifically looking at line items that he doesn't think are necessary? Has he said anything at all?
I think all of the above, Anne-Marie. He's been very clear that he is worried that the price tag of this plan will only worsen the current conditions of inflation, which, again, are expected to go well into next year, even though the White House says that passing this plan would offset those costs. And Manchin has also expressed concern about the substance of some of the proposals in this bill. Now, remember, he comes from the state of West Virginia, the coal state. And it's ironic because on the one hand, this is one of the poorest states with some of the, least education levels in the entire country. They need the social spending aspect, which would help them with childcare, which would give them more health care, et cetera. But there's a poison pill for West Virginians in this bill, and that is climate change policies, because there is a real concern that those would eliminate the coal industry or at least weaken it. And, that is something that West Virginians have long voiced their opposition to. And so even though there have already been concessions, for example, there's no clean energy program in this, which would really make a difference in the coal industry and also bringing down emissions level. Still, what's still in there might not be palatable enough for Manchin to sign off on. He also recently said that he wanted the child tax credit to be extended for a decade, and that's going to cost a lot of money. And I don't know that, it can do that at this point, given the budget for this bill. So, Anne-Marie, to answer your question, there's a lot of things that Manchin is still not on board with, that he has issues with, and that's why the negotiations with him specifically have been going on for so long.
The president loves to kind of self-imposed deadlines, but he's always blowing through them. So I almost don't know why he does that, unless it's to sort of manufacture a sense of urgency to get something done. But what are the political ramifications of failing to pass this by the end of the year?
I think, right now, the president's numbers on handling the economy speak for themselves. They are not good. Americans do not believe he's doing a good job, even though he has made gains, even though unemployment levels are down. The problem, though, Anne-Marie, is that people feel the pinch. They don't have any instant relief that they're hoping for, even though he has also, as an example, released 50 million barrels of oil from the strategic reserve. when people are having a hard time making ends meet, someone has to be held accountable. And right now that is the president, even though he says he's doing everything he can to help people out. So even though these policies are in place, even though, as an example, infrastructure was just passed, and that's expected to pump a good amount of money into the economy, create millions of new jobs, that takes time. And, people don't have time to spend right now when they're talking about paying their bills, getting rent in, making sure their children have food on the table. And so I think that's a real way that this could impact the president and his numbers and his approval rating if the economy does not bounce back in a way that he wants, in a way that Americans feel every day.
Democrats also got some disappointing news from the Senate parliamentarian. That's the official who interprets the Senate's rules.
Right.
And the parliamentarian rejected Democrats' efforts to include a provision for undocumented immigrants in the social spending plan. So what did that provision include, and why was it rejected? And can it be overruled?
This isn't surprising that this official overruled having immigration built in. This is the third time that she has done that. Remember, she's nonpartisan. She looks at the text, she looks at the bill and what the policies would be. And because we have to remember, Democrats are using a very particular process to pass this called reconciliation that we've talked at length about. Basically, it means they don't need a single Republican vote to get on board. That's why there's so much infighting right now with Joe Manchin and with Kyrsten Sinema, another Democratic senator who is hesitant, because they need every single Democratic vote. But because they're using this process, Anne-Marie, everything in this legislation has to directly impact the federal budget. And the parliamentarian said that these provisions for immigration do not do that. Progressives are especially upset because in this bill, as they were hoping, it would not have given a path to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented workers. So it was already a bit of a concession for them. But it would have offered some work authorizations and some deportation protections for those people who are undocumented. But the parliamentarian said, doing that does not have a direct impact on the budget, so you have to take it out.
All right, Weijia, thank you so much.
Sure.